Hi, I'm Phil. I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict too. But yeah. When I was 14 years old, it was the first time I ever got loaded. My parents had gotten divorced the year before, which wasn't the end of the world. It was not a happy marriage. But what wasn't very good about it is they decided to move us lock, stock, and barrel from the neighborhood in Washington, D.C., where I grew up, to a suburb of Cincinnati, Ohio, called Green Hills, which is every bit as bad as it sounds. And to add insult to injury, they enrolled me in an all-boys Catholic school 20 miles from the neighborhood that I was lived in. So, I mean, it was like I didn't have friends in the neighborhood. There were no girls. I liked girls. It was just really messed up. And I remember spending that year being like so incredibly lonely and so incredibly unhappy. The only thing that I could hold on to is someday it's not going to be like this. Someday it's not going to be like this. But it was painful every day. I was really excited in between my freshman and sophomore year. Like I said, I was 14. Some of the older kids, the cool kids, the kids that I was told, to stay away from, people like us, future members of Alcoholics Anonymous, invited me to a party out in the woods. And I don't know if you remember those things, but I was really happy to be there. When I got there, they immediately handed me a beer. I remember it was a Rolling Rock green can, terrible beer. And I'd never had a beer before, and I didn't like the taste. And alcoholics were always very helpful to the newcomer, and this was really no different. The guy came up and said, "Hey, let me show you how to shotgun." And so I shotgunned one, got it all over me. They were all laughing. Shotgun another, did much better. And then I sat down and was feeling, not bad. And they started passing around joints. Now, of course, in those days, that came with a hazard, is they had seeds and stems in them, and they're popping all over the place. I've got burns in my good shirt. It was brutal right from the beginning. But I was feeling so good, having such a good time. And then the earth started to spin. And I spent the majority of the rest of the evening in the bushes, puking like Linda Blair. And I don't really remember anything until the next morning. When I got up the next morning, and it probably wasn't even the next morning, I got up the next day, and I had a terrible hangover. Just like the Clint Eastwood pounding vein right in the middle of my forehead type of hangover. And it was brutal. Just the sun hurt, every little sound hurt. I had to gather up all my clothes, and they were, it was disgusting, and I had to hide them. And I immediately got in the shower, and then I went downstairs to get something to help, in my stomach. And my mother, she looked right at me. I don't know how she knew this because I got out of the shower, but she looked right at me and she said, "Have you been drinking?" And there it was. The very first day, and I was caught right off the bat. And so what could I do? I looked right at her and I lied. And in looking back on that, it's so amazing because that first night was a microcosm of what my entire alcoholism would look like, right? I was going to continue to drink because, my thought through all of this was, I can't wait to do this again. This was wonderful. And in spite of the consequences, I wanted to do it again. And it was always like that. The consequences just didn't matter much to me, if I could even bring them into my mind. It's and the other thing of it is that I had a career of lying about my alcoholism, lying about it all the time, minimizing it, rationalizing it, lying about it. And my life got worse right away. I was always a good student. My grades went to shit. I didn't go on to college. This was a college prep school. Everybody went on to college. I didn't go on to college. I started selling weed. And I would, this wasn't, open up Uncle Ike's. This was, I'm a criminal. And I was pretty afraid that I was going to go to prison at some point. So I gathered up all my belongings and I took a Greyhound bus out to Seattle, where unfortunately people just like me were drinking and drugging here too. And I had not really counted on that. But what happened is that there's the short version of all this is my world got smaller and smaller. I mean, really just smaller and smaller, less and less options. And I think the other thing uh, that really stood out is just two things. Number one, just how much every day was exactly the same. That yesterday was today, today was tomorrow, and they were all, revolving around getting loaded, or recovering from getting loaded, or trying to figure out where I was going to get the money to get loaded. It was just, I mean, it is exhausting to be an alcoholic, And then there's all the other stuff. I was in a relationship with a woman that really, really loved me, and I mean, it was difficult for her. She really loved me, but she really hated to see me in this situation. And I was trying a million different things to learn how to try and drink in a way that wouldn't cause problems, which meant we went back to church, which means I developed a spiritual life, but I was still loaded. And we tried therapy, which means I learned a lot about myself and I'm still loaded. I just couldn't quit. And, one day she said, I think it's important that you go to one of these 12-step meetings. And I mean, I wasn't really on for that, but I mean, I think at that present time I was kind of in the doghouse. I don't know if you've ever been in a relationship where you're drinking put you in the doghouse, but I was there, and I wanted to get out of the doghouse and back into the bedroom. And so I agreed, and what happened was I got into this meeting, and so the first thing is just for context, we drove to the meeting, and back in those days, I don't know if it, but we pulled up and there was all these really sketchy looking people hanging out front, smoking cigarettes and whatnot. And I was like, go around the block. And she was like, get out of the car, and, our car at the time, I mean, it was just a bad deal. Car at the time was a 62 Ford Falcon Futura, which is a classic now, but back then it was just a POS, which was pretty typical. I mean, there just was nothing about my life that was going. Anyway, I got out of the car and I went inside, and the most amazing thing happened is that these people were talking about stuff that I could really resonate with. They were describing my thoughts, they were describing my feelings, and this is the real kicker. They were laughing about the stuff that was really tragic in my life, because as it turns out, the stuff is pretty funny when it's not happening to you. And I was just amazed. And then the other thing that happened is after the meeting, a total stranger to me, I don't know his name, I couldn't pick him out of a crowd of two. But the person came up to me after the meeting, he said, hey, Phil, we're going to have a meeting here tomorrow, and just don't drink or drug till you get to that meeting. And I was like, this had like never occurred to me, nothing like this had ever occurred to me, that I just had to stay sober till the next day. And so I did. And what happened is I continued to go back to those meetings because I felt so at home. I mean, right away, the power of the very first word of our steps, the power of we was in my life. And that was a big, big thing. And I can't say my life got better right away, but it stopped getting worse. And that was better. And my relationship with Lynn began to improve. Now, she'd been pretty distant with me, pretty forlorn, but we started having a lightness back to our thing. And I remember about 6 weeks in, we were having a particularly good night, and she looked at me and she said, this is really going to work for you, isn't it? And I said, yeah, I mean, this is really going to work. And she said, I'm so happy to hear that because I'm leaving you. And yeah, I was crestfallen. I was like, please, you can't do that. I mean, I've been promising all this time I wouldn't do this. And now that I'm finally doing it, you're going to leave me. And she's like, Phil, I'm worn out. I'm just worn out. And I wish I could say at 6 weeks that I really understood the damage that I'd caused her. That I could see that she'd been living a really tough life too. It's like we're on this roller coaster, but they're on the roller coaster too. We at least can see what's in front of us because we're in the lead cars. They're in the rear, And so all those times that I had promised not to do things and that I'd done it again, all of the betrayals, all of the disappointments, the half-truths, all of that stuff. I didn't realize that just like I was leading this alcoholic life, she was hiding my alcoholism from everybody in her family because they told her, this kid's no good. You got to leave him, right? And she's going through the same thing, making the rationalizations, the excuses. So we were a couple of sick people. And I begged her and I begged her and I begged her not to leave, and she just was like adamant to do it, and so because all I could think of is what a selfish bitch, you know. I mean, honestly, that's all I could think, right? It never occurred to me to see it her way. And, so I went back to the meetings and, I expected to get some sympathy, because this was a bad deal for me. And, and all these AA people just wanted me to hit me over the head with the same advice we give newcomers today. Hey, Phil, it sounds really bad. I really empathize with you. How about you try getting a book, a sponsor, and taking the steps, And of course, that stuff didn't really appeal to me at all, simply because I'm a smart guy. I'd read ahead. There was nothing about 4 or 5 that was at all appealing. And really, the one that really got me was this step 7, remove my shortcomings. These are the only things that make my life interesting, And so, I mean, this idea, I'm never going to have fun again. So what happened to me is because I really believe that I only had 2 problems, which was drugs and alcohol, that the rest of it could be solved through some other stuff, specifically everything that every newcomer wants, a relationship, which means I was just lonely. And I was right back to the same spot I was when I was 14. And I just didn't involve myself in this fellowship. And as a result, at a certain point, I began to think, I'm rather thirsty, and thirsty alcoholics drink. And that's what I did. And, it took me a long, long time to get to the steps. It would have been easier if somebody had explained to me what the steps, not that I was open to any of this, but if somebody had explained to me what the steps really were. And I think the best definition is the ones that appear into the foreword of the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, where it says the steps are a set of spiritual principles, a set of principles, spiritual in nature, which, when practiced as a way of life, expels the obsession for alcohol and allows the sufferer to live happily and usefully whole. And I found that to be true. So today, my entire concentration in my everyday life is to try and internalize the steps of alcoholics, or not the steps of alcoholics, but the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous that are contained in the steps. And every single one of them, I believe, is God's will for us. Honesty, hope, faith, courage, integrity, willingness, humility, brotherly love, justice, perseverance, spirituality, and last and most importantly, service. Right? It is the service of others where all of the goodness comes in my life today. And I'm glad that I've taken the steps enough times to be useful to take other people through the steps. It's my avocation. It's what I like to do with my free time. And it's allowed me to have the rich and wonderful life that I always wanted to have, that I couldn't find any place except for here. I'm an older guy now, and I can tell you, looking back at my life, at no point do I ever say to myself, geez, I wish I'd helped a lot less people. And that's really, really important, because that's our legacy here, right? That's our legacy, is that there's people coming in that only we can help. Only we can help them. And if we're not here to help them, they're lost. So thank God for Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank God for all of you. And thank you for letting me speak tonight.